The tone remains serious, intimate, and deeply personal, but flows more naturally without heavy pauses. Sophie named her daughter after me. I was standing in the hospital room, holding this tiny, perfect human with her mother's nose and her father's dark hair, and Sophie looked up at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Her name is Megan, after the best friend I've ever had." I smiled. I said all the right things. I held that baby and told her she was beautiful and that her Auntie Megan would always be there for her. And the whole time, all I could think was, your mother doesn't know what I did, and if she ever finds out, she'll never forgive me. Have you ever carried a secret so heavy that it changed the way you see yourself? Not a small lie, something big, something that would destroy a relationship if it ever came to light. If you have, you know the feeling I'm talking about. That constant pressure behind your ribs, the way you flinch every time the phone rings. Drop a comment if you've been there. I need to know I'm not alone in this. My name is Megan, and 4 years ago, I destroyed my best friend's marriage. She thinks it was fate. She thinks Daniel just wasn't the one. She thinks the universe was protecting her from a man who would have broken her heart eventually. She has no idea that I'm the one who broke it for her. It started with a photograph, or rather, it started with what I thought I saw through a restaurant window on a rainy Tuesday night. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Sophie and I met in college. Freshman year, random roommate assignment. The kind of thing that usually ends in passive-aggressive post-it notes and requests for room transfers. But from the first night, when we stayed up until 4 a.m. talking about everything and nothing, I knew she was different. She was warm in a way I'd never experienced. Open. The kind of person who remembered your coffee order after hearing it once, who noticed when you were having a bad day before you even realized it yourself. She made friendship look easy, and for someone like me, guarded, analytical, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, that was revolutionary. For 15 years, she was my person. Through bad breakups and worse jobs, through her father's death and my mother's illness, through every high and low that life threw at us. And then she met Daniel. He was perfect for her. I say that without bitterness, even now. He was kind and steady and looked at her like she'd hung the moon. He made her laugh, really laugh, the kind that made her snort and then get embarrassed about snorting. He remembered her allergies, learned to cook her favorite meals, drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to bring her soup when she was sick. They got married after 2 years of dating. I was the maid of honor. I cried during my speech, genuine tears, because I was genuinely happy for her. At least, I thought I was. Looking back now, I wonder if the seed was already planted, if some part of me was already jealous of what they had. Not jealous of Daniel, I never wanted him, but jealous of that certainty, that completeness, the way Sophie didn't need me as much anymore because she had him. But that's not an excuse for what I did. Nothing is. It was a Tuesday. The tone remains serious, intimate, and deeply personal, but flows more naturally without heavy pauses. I remember because Tuesdays were my late nights at the office, which meant I always grabbed dinner at this little Thai place on my way home. Same restaurant, same table, same green curry. Routine is comforting when everything else feels chaotic. That night, it was raining. Not a drizzle, a downpour. The kind of rain that turns the world into watercolors, blurring the edges of everything until you're not quite sure what you're seeing. I was walking past La Maison, that French place downtown that's always booked 3 weeks out, when I saw him, Daniel. He was sitting at a table by the window, leaning forward, his hand reaching across the table toward someone I couldn't quite see. The candle between them cast his face in warm light, and he was smiling. Not the polite smile he gave strangers, or the tired smile he gave after long days at work. The smile he gave Sophie. I stopped walking. The rain was soaking through my coat, running down my face, but I couldn't move. I watched him say something, watched his hand close around the other person's fingers, watched him bring their hand to his lips and kiss it. And then she leaned forward, and I saw her face. Not Sophie. A woman I'd never seen before. Dark hair, red lipstick, maybe 10 years older than Daniel. Beautiful in a sophisticated way that made my stomach turn. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, long enough to see him stroke her cheek, long enough to see her smile like they had a secret, long enough for my phone to appear in my hand almost automatically, my fingers finding the camera before my brain caught up. I took 3 photos. Then I ran. I don't remember getting home. I don't remember changing out of my wet clothes or making tea or sitting on my couch in the dark. I just remember staring at those photos on my phone, zooming in, trying to convince myself I'd seen it wrong. But I hadn't. Daniel Chen, the man my best friend had vowed to spend forever with, was having dinner with another woman, holding her hand, kissing her fingers, looking at her the way he was only supposed to look at Sophie. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I had a decision to make. What would you do? If you saw your best friend's husband with another woman, would you tell her immediately? Would you confront him first? Would you pretend you never saw anything and hope it was nothing? I thought about all those options. I thought about them until my head ached and my eyes burned. And then I made the worst decision of my life. I decided to tell Sophie, but not directly. Looking back, I can rationalize it 100 ways. I didn't want to be wrong. I didn't want to destroy her marriage over a misunderstanding. I didn't want her to shoot the messenger, to blame me for being the one to break her heart. But the truth, the real truth, I was a coward. I couldn't bear to watch her face crumble. I couldn't stand the thought of being there when her world fell apart. So I found a way to deliver the blow without getting my hands dirty. I created a new email address, something generic and untraceable. And I wrote, Sophie, I'm sorry to send this anonymously, but I thought you deserved to know. Your husband was at La Maison last Tuesday night with another woman. I saw them together. He was holding her hand and kissing it. I took photos, which I've attached. I don't know who the woman is. I don't know how long this has been going on, but you deserve the truth. I'm sorry. I read it 17 times before I hit send. Then I threw up in my bathroom sink. Sophie called me 2 hours later. I was at work, pretending to focus on spreadsheets, when her name flashed on my screen. Megan. Her voice was wrong, hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made her Sophie and left only a shell. Hey, what's up? I made my voice casual, normal, the voice of someone who hadn't just detonated a bomb in her best friend's life. Can you come over? I can't. She broke off, and I heard her crying, the kind of crying that sounds like drowning. I'm on my way. I left work without explanation, drove across town with my hands shaking on the wheel, and when I got to her apartment, I found her on the kitchen floor, surrounded by printed photos. My photos. Someone sent these to me, she whispered. Someone saw Daniel with another woman and sent me proof. I sat down beside her, put my arm around her, let her cry into my shoulder while guilt ate through my chest like acid. It could be a misunderstanding, I said. Maybe it's not what it looks like. Look at them, Megan. Look at his face. That's not a business dinner. That's not a friend. I looked, and she was right. It didn't look innocent. But I didn't know. I couldn't know. I'd taken 3 photos through a rain-streaked window, and I'd used them to burn down her life. What are you going to do? I asked. Sophie wiped her face. Something in her expression hardened. I'm going to ask him. Tonight. And if he can't explain, if he won't tell me who she is, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Sophie confronted Daniel that night. I know because she called me at midnight, her voice raw from crying. He wouldn't tell me who she was. I was sitting in my dark apartment, phone pressed to my ear, feeling like the worst person alive. What do you mean he wouldn't tell you? I showed him the photos. I asked him directly, who is this woman and why were you having dinner with her? And he just froze. He looked at the photos for a long time, and then he said he couldn't explain. Couldn't or wouldn't? Both. I don't know. He kept saying, I can't tell you, Sophie. I'm sorry, but I can't tell you. Like there was some reason he was protecting her. Or himself. My stomach dropped. What does that even mean? I don't know. She was crying again. If it was innocent, why wouldn't he just explain? If she was a colleague or a friend or anyone legitimate, why would he keep it secret? The only reason to refuse to tell me is if he has something to hide. I wanted to argue with her, wanted to suggest other possibilities. But what could I say? The photos looked damning. His refusal to explain looked like guilt, and I was the one who'd put her in this position. I told him I needed space, Sophie continued. He's staying at his brother's for a few days while I think. Sophie, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. You didn't do this to me. He did. Those words hit like a knife. But I did do this to you, I thought. I saw something I didn't understand, and instead of investigating or confronting or even just leaving it alone, I decided to play God with your marriage, and now it's falling apart. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Sophie disintegrate. She lost weight, stopped sleeping, called Daniel a dozen times, begging him to explain, and he kept refusing. Each refusal was another nail in the coffin of their marriage. Why won't he just tell me? She asked me one night, exhausted and hollowed out. If it's innocent, why protect her? I had no answer. Neither did Daniel. Sophie filed for divorce 3 weeks later. The divorce was fast. Daniel didn't contest anything. He gave Sophie the apartment, most of their savings, everything she asked for. He moved to Seattle for a job transfer, and within 6 months, it was like he'd never existed. Sophie threw herself into rebuilding. New apartment, new job, new haircut. She started therapy, started dating again, started becoming a version of herself I didn't recognize. Harder, more guarded, less trusting. I should have known, she told me one night over wine. Looking back, there were signs. What kind of signs? He was secretive, always on his phone, leaving the room to take calls. He had that whole week last year where he was traveling for work but couldn't tell me where. She shook her head. I trusted him completely, and he was lying to me the whole time. I nodded, agreed, played the role of supportive best friend. But inside, a different voice was screaming, what if you're wrong? What if there's an explanation? What if you destroyed their marriage over a misunderstanding? I pushed the voice down, buried it deep, told myself that Daniel's refusal to explain was proof enough. If he was innocent, he would have defended himself. His silence was a confession. But silence isn't always guilt. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes people keep secrets not because they're doing something wrong, but because the truth would hurt someone else. I didn't understand that then. It took years and one terrible discovery before I finally understood what Daniel was protecting. And by then, it was far too late. 2 years passed. Sophie met someone new, a guy named Eric, who was uncomplicated and adoring and about as different from Daniel as possible. He was loud where Daniel was quiet, spontaneous where Daniel was planned, open where Daniel was reserved. I never have to wonder what Eric's thinking. He just says it. No secrets, no mystery. I smiled and said I was happy for her. And I was, mostly. But sometimes late at night, I wondered if she'd traded depth for safety, if Eric was really the love of her life or just the opposite of her greatest heartbreak. She got pregnant a year into their relationship, proposed to Eric herself because waiting around for men to make decisions is a waste of time. They got married at City Hall, casual and quick, and I stood beside her for the second time and watched her say vows to a man I wasn't sure she truly loved. Here's where I need to pause and ask you something. By this point, I'd convinced myself that I'd done the right thing, that Sophie was better off without Daniel, that whatever he was hiding, she deserved someone who wouldn't hide it. But lately, I've been wondering, do we always deserve the truth, even when the truth might be more complicated than we can handle? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm still wrestling with this, even now. When Sophie named her daughter after me, I cried. Everyone thought they were happy tears. They weren't. They were guilt, pure, concentrated guilt. Because this child, this beautiful, innocent baby, existed because I'd destroyed her mother's first marriage. If I hadn't sent those photos, Sophie might still be with Daniel, might have a different baby, a different life. I'd rewritten Sophie's entire future with one anonymous email, and she was thanking me for it. That night, I went home and drank until I couldn't think anymore. It became a pattern. 3 years and 4 months after the divorce, I got a letter. No return address, just my name, handwritten in careful block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper and another envelope, smaller, sealed. The paper said, "Megan, I know it was you. I've known since the beginning. Your email was anonymous, but the photos weren't as careful as you thought. The angle, the reflection, I figured it out. I never told Sophie. She needed someone to lean on, and you were there for her. Telling her would have taken that away too. The smaller envelope is for her. If you have any decency left, you'll give it to her after you read what's inside. You took something from me I can never get back. But maybe you can still give Sophie something I couldn't. The truth. Asterisk. Daniel." My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open the smaller envelope. Inside was a letter addressed to Sophie, and behind it, documents, official documents, birth certificates, DNA test results, correspondence with an adoption agency. I read everything. Then I read it again. And then I understood what I had done. The woman in the restaurant was Daniel's birth mother. Daniel had been adopted at birth. It was something he'd mentioned to Sophie once, early in their relationship, but he'd always said he had no interest in finding his biological family. His adoptive parents were his real parents. That was that. What he never told Sophie, what he never told anyone, was that his adoptive mother was sick, cancer, terminal. And in the months before she died, Daniel had started thinking about where he came from. Not to replace his parents, but to understand himself, to know his medical history, to fill in the blanks that had always haunted him. He'd hired a private investigator, found his birth mother living 2 hours away, a woman named Catherine who had given him up at 17 because she had no choice. They'd been meeting in secret for 6 months when I saw them at La Maison. That dinner, the one I photographed, was their 5th meeting. Catherine was telling Daniel about his birth father, a man who died before Daniel was born. Daniel was showing her pictures from his childhood, the life she'd never gotten to see. The hand-holding, the kiss, the intimacy I'd witnessed. It wasn't romantic. It was a son meeting his mother for the first time. But Daniel couldn't tell Sophie. His adoptive mother was still alive, fighting her battle, and Daniel couldn't bear for her to find out he'd searched for his birth mother. He was terrified it would break her heart, that she'd think she wasn't enough, that she'd spend her final months feeling replaced. So when Sophie confronted him with my photos, Daniel made a choice. He let her believe the worst about him rather than reveal a secret that could hurt his dying mother. He chose his mother's peace over his own marriage. And I, with my anonymous email and my cowardly assumptions, had forced him into that impossible position. He was never having an affair. He was trying to protect the people he loved, and I destroyed him for it. I found Catherine's address in the documents Daniel sent. I drove there the next day. 2 hours of highway, my mind racing the entire time. I didn't know what I would say or what I hoped to accomplish. I just knew I needed to see her, needed to understand. She lived in a small house with a garden out front. When she answered the door, I recognized her immediately. Older than in my photos, grayer, but the same dark hair and elegant features. "Can I help you?" "My name is Megan. I'm..." I couldn't find the words. "I'm the reason Daniel got divorced." Her expression flickered. Recognition, then something harder. "You'd better come in." We sat in her kitchen while she made tea neither of us drank. I told her everything: the photos, the email, Sophie's devastation, Daniel's refusal to explain. "He never told me about the divorce," Catherine said quietly. "We lost touch after his mother died. He said it was too hard, too many painful memories tied up in all of it. I assumed he meant his mother. Now I wonder." "Did you know about the photos? That someone had taken pictures of you?" "Not until later. Daniel called me after Sophie confronted him. He was frantic. He said someone had photographed us and sent the images to his wife, and she thought he was having an affair. I wanted to tell her the truth myself. I would have done anything to save his marriage, but he wouldn't let me. He said his mother was getting worse, that the stress could kill her, that he'd rather lose Sophie than risk his mother dying thinking she wasn't enough. I felt sick. His mother died 7 months later, Catherine continued. By then, the divorce was final. Sophie had moved on. Daniel said it was too late to explain, that telling her the truth would only hurt her more. What was she supposed to do with it? Regret her decision? Feel guilty for not trusting him? So he just let her think he cheated? He thought it was kinder, cleaner. She could hate him and move on. The truth would only complicate things. I sat with that for a long moment. "He sent me a letter," I finally said, "with documents, and another letter for Sophie." Catherine nodded slowly. "He called me last week, said he'd found out who sent the photos, said he'd spent years wondering, and he'd finally figured it out." "How? How did he know it was me?" "The reflection in the window. You can see yourself in one of the images. Just a shadow, but enough. He recognized your coat. And once he knew, everything made sense. The angle of the photos, the email arriving right after. You were always there for Sophie through the divorce." She looked at me with something that might have been pity. "He said he wasn't angry anymore, just tired. He sent you that letter because he's dying, Megan." The world stopped. "What?" "Heart condition. Genetic, apparently. One of the things he was trying to find out by meeting me. He has maybe 6 months. He wanted to set things right before he runs out of time." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Daniel was dying. The man whose life I'd destroyed, whose marriage I'd ended, whose one chance at happiness with Sophie I'd stolen, he was dying. And his last act was to give me the truth I'd been too cowardly to find myself. I've had the letter for Sophie for 3 weeks now. I haven't given it to her yet. Every time I think about it, I imagine her face, the confusion, the horror, the slow dawning realization that her best friend, the woman she named her daughter after, was the reason her first marriage fell apart. She'd learned that Daniel never cheated, that he sacrificed everything to protect his dying mother, that he loved Sophie enough to let her hate him rather than make her complicit in his secret. And she'd learn that I saw something I didn't understand and chose to destroy rather than ask questions. that I was too much of a coward to confront Daniel directly, too afraid to tell her in person, too desperate to play the hero while hiding behind an anonymous email. She'd lose everything she believes about me, about Daniel, about the last 4 years of her life. Is that fair to her? Daniel clearly thinks she deserves to know. That's why he sent the letter. That's why he reached out to me instead of just letting it die with him. But I'm not sure anymore. Sophie is happy now. She has Eric, who loves her completely. She has baby Megan, who has her mother's smile. She has a life built on the ashes of her first marriage, a life that might crumble if she learns the foundation was a lie. Would the truth set her free, or would it just destroy her all over again? I don't know. I talked to Daniel 2 days ago, found his number in the documents and called, not expecting him to answer, but he did. Megan, his voice was tired, different, the voice of someone who stopped fighting. I got your letter. I read everything. And? Why didn't you tell her? After your mother died, why not explain? He was quiet for a long time. Because by then, it was too late. She'd already filed, already started moving on. What was I supposed to say? Hey, I know you think I cheated, but actually, I was meeting my birth mother in secret, and I chose to protect my dying adoptive mom instead of our marriage? How does that help her? She deserved to know the truth. Maybe, but the truth isn't always a gift, Megan. Sometimes it's just another burden. I thought about that, about all the times I'd told myself I was doing the right thing by sending those photos, about how I'd convinced myself Sophie deserved to know, when really, I just couldn't bear to keep the secret myself. What do you want me to do? I asked. I want you to give her my letter, not because she needs it. She's happy now, happier than she was with me, maybe, but because I need her to know I never stopped loving her, that I would have spent my whole life trying to be the husband she deserved if things had been different. And the part about me, about what I did, that's your choice. My letter doesn't mention you. She'll know someone sent those photos, but she won't know it was her best friend. He paused. Unless you tell her yourself. So here I am. Sophie's letter is on my kitchen table. My confession is written in my head, rewritten 1,000 times. Tomorrow, I'm going to give her both. Not because Daniel asked me to, not because I think it will make anything better, but because I've spent 4 years pretending to be the person she thinks I am, and I'm exhausted. I don't know if she'll forgive me. I don't know if our friendship will survive. I don't know if the truth will set us free or just burn down everything we've built. But I know I can't carry this secret anymore. Not for another year. Not for another month. Not for another day. Sophie deserves to know who she named her daughter after, even if it breaks us both. So that's my story. The worst thing I've ever done and the secret I've carried for 4 years. But I need to know. What would you do? If you were me, would you tell Sophie everything? Would you give her Daniel's letter and confess your part in it? Or would you stay silent and let her keep the life she's built? There's no right answer. I've been wrestling with this for weeks. Type "tell" or "stay silent" in the comments and let me know why. And if you've ever had to choose between a comfortable lie and a devastating truth, I'd love to hear how you handled it. Because right now, I'm about to knock on my best friend's door, and I have no idea what comes next. Some secrets protect the people we love. Others just protect ourselves. The hardest part is knowing the difference. Megan.